Good afternoon, everyone. This morning has been fairly heavily focused on technology. AI has been mentioned in pretty much every panel that we've had so far since the start of today. And now for something a little bit different, please welcome Niamh Gallagher from Mindway AI as she speaks to Anika Howard, from CEO of WONDR, discussing the hurdles and barriers that people encounter in promoting and marketing one of the biggest, fastest growing sectors of our industry now, women's sports.
Thanks, Andy. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? So thanks so much for joining today. As Andy said, my name is Niamh Gallagher. I'm Marketing Manager at Mindway AI. So today's session is going to be women's sport, a winning bet. So I was really excited when I heard I was going to be moderating this session. You've probably seen from the agenda online, there's a little bit of a change in the original lineup. And I'd like to welcome Anika Howard, President and CEO of WONDR. And Anika has stepped in to save the day today, so thank you.
Anytime.
So WONDR is an online gaming entertainment company focused on partnering with best-in-class gaming platforms using emerging technologies and trends to create new and exciting experiences for players. And it's women-led and tribally owned. And so, Anika, your past roles include Foxwood, Resorts Casinos, IGT, Caesars Entertainment, and you're also on the board of Global Gaming Women,
Yes.
Which is amazing. So I thought to kick off today's discussion, it would be good to share some stats which we can just touch on throughout this session. But one that I thought was particularly interesting from Deloitte. So they estimate that global women's sport, elite sport, for this year is going to surpass $1 billion in revenue. And that's actually up 300% than predicted in 2021. So obviously, emerging massive powerhouse. Some amazing stats that we'll touch on throughout the panel. But Anika, just to go to you, so how do you think that these kind of figures translate into the betting market?
I mean, I think a number of things. When you look at the opportunities that women athletes are presenting and creating, just in terms of the economy for sports, I think it's amazing. You look at Caitlin Clark and the recent commercial from Nike, because she shattered, handily shattered the NCAA all-scoring records, not just for women, just in general across the board. And you're seeing a lot of women athletes at the top of their game. You look at Angel Reese, and you look at Juju Watkins, and a lot of athletes are just amazing, and that's just in the field of college basketball, but that transcends beyond that. I mean, even if you look at, lover or hater, the Taylor Swift effect for sports and for NFL, and looking at how that kind of really shifted the way people covered football and increased, the recognition and the participation and the marketability of a lot of the things in the sport. I think that now that you said, this NFL Super Bowl was one of the highest viewed and ranking and breaking all these types of records. And so you're seeing that, bringing and introducing women into this arena in a more impactful way makes an interesting difference. I think, for football specifically, I think that's the most followed sport by women. About 46% of fans are, women.
Yeah, there's some amazing stats coming out so far. I was looking up beforehand, so we have some here from the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association. They report 39% of US sports bettors are women. And then the NCAA reported that 51% of female identifying respondents to their 2023 sports wagering survey participated in betting activities in the past year.
Yep.
So, obviously there's a huge shift happening, not only in women's sports, but also in sports betting as well. Some other stats just to share about women's sports and some highlights that have been happening globally. So the Tokyo Olympics in 2021, there's 49% of the athletes were women. This is reported by UN Women. So this is the most gender balanced games that they've had so far. Looking at pay as well, which is obviously an area of discussion that we'll touch on a little bit later, but Naomi Osaka is the highest paid professional sportswoman ever. In 2022, she earned $51.1 million, and that's according to Forbes. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of different stats that we can kind of touch on, like I said, throughout the panel. But just to go back to women in sports and sports betting. So how do you think, what do you think the industry needs to do to get the product and the experience right? Or what have they got right so far?
I mean, so I think it's interesting because I'm going to echo what I've heard on a lot of the panels today, is that it's, the overall format of how we're looking at online sports betting and online casino and just marketing for sports in general is going to need to shift a bit. So it is going to be a lot more community-based. It's going to be a lot more focused on what are the different things that you can do to create engagement and to create connection. And so it's interesting that when you look at some of the things that are in the market, social media has played an immense impact on how people have been able to connect and actually see women's sports. Like I remember, so my sister played basketball for Georgia Tech, and in high school, like handily beating guys at slam dunk competitions. And so, but you never really got a chance to see that. But now when you look at the changes to the NCAA and the ability to do for student athletes to actually to be compensated for that, you're seeing athletes like Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, who are probably making now more money as college athletes than most WNBA players are doing. And so I think part of that, when you have this access to players through social, through other different types of channels, where you can have that connection and start building, once again, I think it's about community, it's about engagement, it's feeling like you're connected to those players and seeing that they're just as exciting and dynamic as players, male players in other sports. I think that also is bringing people into it. So as a organization, I think part of it is how do you capitalize on building those types of relationships? How do you work with organizations? I know, for example, when I was with IGT, we were one of the first people to reach out when Las Vegas Aces came to Las Vegas, and at that time they were begging people to work with them. And so, kind of fast forward, they're national champions, the first champions that the state had. And it's just really about how do you make sure that you put forth that effort that you're doing for other athletes to find ways to engage.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see more and more, betting products that are, women focused as well. For example, so Betty, the iCasino and casual games operator, so their mission is to maximise entertainment value of iCasino for casino or casual players by creating an environment that is safe and inclusive. And also another example, just to touch on, is Flutter UK in Ireland. So they recently launched a competition to find a new partner for a female-focused gaming startup. So we are seeing some changes there. Just to go back and kind of mention a few more stats, because the numbers are so impressive, so I love to read these out. One reported by BetMGM, they've seen over a 40% increase in betting on women's tennis and golf. DraftKings reported 150% increase in WNBA bets between July 2022 and July 2023. That's from Front Office Sports. And then you mentioned already about the NCAA, and DraftKings also reported a 72% increase in bet and handle between 2022 and 2023 for March Madness tournaments as well. So we're definitely seeing some big shifts there happening already. But in terms of women's sports and, obviously appealing to the whole broad market, how do you think that can be marketed or segmented kind of to everyone, not only women, but, so that everyone can engage?
And I think it's happening right now. Because those stats that you're reading aren't just women bettors. That's kind of universal that women are, that you're doing that now. And I think I'll kind of reiterate that as there becomes more focus and interest in women athletes, and that's where the opportunity comes. And so right now you're seeing, just tremendous mainstream appeal for female athletes, for women's sports in areas and opportunities that you did not see that traditionally. And so I think with more media attention and more opportunity, that is really creating this new resurgence of awareness about this new opportunity. And it's not really even, I think, a new opportunity, it's just more awareness.
Yeah.
I think it's also coming at the same time that you are seeing, the saturation of online gaming and sports betting in the markets. And so it's coming to it's kind of, maturity at the same time as sports betting and a lot of these other technologies that are coming too. So it's like the perfect storm of how these things are coming together. I mean, the other thing that we've kind of seen, and AGA did this initially a couple of years ago, and it's proving out time and time again, that people that are sports fans are more likely to be sports bettors, and you're more likely to be invested in something that you put a stake in.
Yeah, no, definitely. So there's so many different things to consider here, and when I was doing some research ahead of this session, one interesting campaign that came up was Sportsbet in Australia partnered with TikTok for a pilot ahead of the Super Bowl last year. So Rihanna's Super Bowl performance, they were taking prop bets on that. So I thought that was something quite interesting. Another case study is UEFA and DAZN. So they were the competition's first global broadcast deal. And initially they had decided to have a paywall for the first period of that, which was 21 to 22, but they've scrapped it to really make it more accessible and to have greater access for people to engage with the sport. So kind of touching on what you mentioned as well, what trends do you think you'll see or we'll see in the future for kind of marketing in women's sports?
I mean, I think you'll see a convergence, and so you're already seeing it now where there is this crossover between pop culture, music, entertainment, fashion, and sports, and you're seeing all of these things coming together. You see it, and I keep on kind of going back with, you see Shaquille O'Neal kind of, escorting on Angel Reese for his alma mater, LSU, and so you're seeing other, not just kind of crossover from entertainers, but other sports and other athletes that are saying, hey, wow, this athlete, this person, she's as good as me. And really, so I think that's a big part of it. You're seeing more and more acknowledgement of the female athletes, but you're also seeing this convergence where there is some celebrity around it. So you're seeing, like I said, entertainers, musicians, other types of movie stars that are all coming to these games, and that is also creating this additional level. Like I said, going back to the Taylor Swift effect, everyone kind of joked about it and TikTok parodies about it, et cetera, but she did introduce a whole new group of women to the sport. Yeah. And so you're seeing that I think a lot of it's going to be what are these things that people are naturally engaged and connected to that then translate into now there's a gateway or a pathway for them to also bring sports into the conversation.
Yeah, and I love the example that you mentioned about Shaquille O'Neal and the advocation for the skill as well, because another thing that I came across was England's Chloe Kelly. So she broke a record at the 2023 World Cup quarterfinals with a penalty kick, which was 69 miles per hour, which broke records. So, there is that acknowledgement of the talent there as well, and the skill. That's really important.
I mean, I can't remember now what the female athlete was, but she went up against Steph Curry, and she actually broke the three-point record for All-Star. I mean, he still won, but she still kind of held that record. So you're seeing, once again, women athletes are kind of being on parity with their male counterparts. And also, I think, from a standpoint of, very, very fitting as we're entering into, International Women's Day, that you're seeing that also male athletes advocating and being allies in that regard. I still remember kind of Brian's interviews with CNN, and so he was always a big advocate of women in sports, bringing his daughter to all the games, talking about and advocating and elevating some of the women in the sport. So I think, once again, a lot of these things are a perfect storm of you have more social media, kind of more kind of this organic conversations that are happening and these communities that are building. And you also are having the male athletes that are advocating as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, there's so many positives, but looking also at the challenges and the barriers, I think we have to kind of address that as well, because, a lot of progress has been made so far, but there's still obviously a lot to go. What do you think are the main kind of hurdles that, we're facing in promoting and marketing women's sports?
I mean, I think it's going to be like just the talent gap. There's this interesting conversation that's happening now that with the new laws with now that student athletes can take advantage of this opportunity, for their name and likeness, that they're making so much money now kind of as amateurs, like how do you price accordingly when they're ready to enter? So Caitlin Clark right now, I think, even in some of her games, it's generating up to $400 a game for just college games. And so now, she's looking to enter the WNBA, and a lot of the players are saying, why? Because in terms of the pay gap and parity, that's a challenge. You have all these amazing athletes, but then as it's time for them to grow into professional, they kind of drop off a little bit because they have to go overseas, or there's not necessarily paid at a point that's equitable for them to be able to really make a living, or in the same way that the male athletes do. So I think that's part of it in terms of how do you keep that momentum. It's how do you kind of adjust that gap. But I think also it's kind of beyond that, what are the things that you need to do programmatically? So the challenge is, once again, everything is a one-size-fits-all. And so we're hearing consistently, even all day today, that is going to be a natural shift in the industry, not just for women's sports, but in general, because the need for having more of this organic, community-based, stats-specific, having everything in one place experience is becoming more and more of what we're seeing that players are wanting and shifting to.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned about pay, and just another example is the National Women's Soccer League. Alex Morgan, so she actually earned more off-field in 2022 than she did for her playing salary. So it was 6.2 million off-field and 800K for her playing salary. So there's obviously a bit of a little bit of a disconnect there. Yeah. Looking at what has come before, so how maybe branding might have been done. So we've seen before where there's pink branded casinos or betting sites and things like that. Do you see that changing as well?
I mean, I don't know. I think maybe just because I've never been kind of the pink person, and I feel like there's the pink tax, and so I don't think you have to make everything pink for women to want to play, or that. I think it's more about creating a compelling experience, talking to, kind of connecting with things that are interesting, and and really targeting in just the same way that you would target any other group. I mean, you look at one of the interesting things that, anecdotally, I don't know if there's any research that I can specifically point to, but when you talked about women that play fantasy or women that bet, that women are much, much more researchers and focusing on that, because initially you go in because you're like, okay, I don't want to embarrass myself. And then you go into the point, well, okay, no, I got this, so I want to embarrass everybody else. And so you really kind of come into this competitive nature of finding the information and wanting to do that. And so I think you tap into what are the core motivators, and that some of them will be, specifically female, but I think you'll find that they're a little bit more broad, and it's really just kind of making is representation, kind of seeing yourself represented in the commercial and in a way that makes sense, that authentically to you. And that doesn't mean that you're braiding your hair and putting lipstick on. It could be just you're just same thing with guys, but it's a group of girls that are out at a bar watching a game, doing some of these types of things. And so I think in many cases it's not necessarily has to be this overly kind of big production of making everything pink or doing some of these other things. It's really just kind of figuring out kind of at the core what are the things that are motivating people that from a betters. And I think Adam, I kind of wrote it down. He had a really good comment that's saying that everybody has an opinion and they always think they're right. So what are opinions that are more strongly held by women versus men, and how do you capitalize on that? So
yeah, and so just on the topic of perception. So ahead of this session, I did a little bit of a test case, or a bit of kind of Googling myself, women's versus men's sports. So I did a Google search for the England captains, so the men's team and the women's team, so Harry Kane and Leah Williamson. So for Harry Kane, this is what came up in the Google search results. So Harry Kane, dates joined, stats, transfer, net worth, wife, and then goals this season, which sounds about right. And then when I Googled Leah, so Leah Williamson, partner, husband, age, injury, height, and then where does she live?
Yeah.
Which is a bit strange.
Yeah.
But she was also the first female footballer to be sponsored by Gucci. Yeah. So, there's the conversation there where it's like, okay, given from, Google search kind of like that. And then on the other side, these massive sponsorship deals happening. Do you think there's going to be a change in kind of like how it's going to be perceived in the future as well?
In terms of female athletes?
Female athletes, yeah, and female sport, yeah.
I mean, I think so. I mean, I think that's the challenge that we have too. I mean, you don't see it just in female athletes. I mean, you can find lots and lots of, where they're kind of even female, actresses and whatever. The questions and types of things that they ask or that they gravitate to for athletes based on, your sex is very, very different. And so I think part of it needs to be a little bit of a cultural shift in terms of like what are the things that matter and focus. And I feel like a lot of the athletes coming up, and you're starting to see that slightly now. I mean, part of it is now you have a broader variety of sports and newscasters, and so the questions are shifting.
Yeah.
Also, when you have more women podcasters that are talking about really kind of the game and kind of the athletes and their athleticism and the things that are more important to them outside of just kind of the ancillary pieces of it.
That's a good point actually about the broadcasters as well. So the question dynamic, it's going to change a little bit. So another thing is about kind of the commercial opportunities and the collaborations. So I think we're just starting to see some of that happening as well. So one example is Angel City, so the National Women's Soccer League. The valuation is expected to surpass over 100 million. So they have investors such as Niamh, Serena Williams, and then you mentioned about celebrities as well. So Natalie Portman, Jennifer Garner are investing as well. So I think you're right as well. Like that kind of spotlight on it is going to make a big change as well. Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I think you're starting to see, like I said earlier, this crossover of convergence of different entertainment industries coming together. I think everyone are kind of sports fans and enjoy it and trying to figure out ways to become vested in it. I think it started more so with the sports betting and iGaming pieces of it, where you saw athletes kind of stepping in and kind of in places where not before that they wouldn't necessarily do for a casino, or endorsing and becoming and doing advertising in this space. And I can see that, maybe that's a shift too. We haven't really seen any female athletes kind of in some of these spokesperson roles, and so maybe that's something that also shifts and helps. Yeah, and so just kind of looking at the future outlook and how the industry can kind of highlight awareness around this as well. So what do you think will be some things that will need to be considered down the line? For example, say for gambling for women especially, or how sports might have an impact in women in leadership?
I mean, I think we're seeing it now. I mean, you have Amy Howe that's kind of leading in FanDuel, and you're starting to see more and more women in leadership in these spaces. And so I think that's always just going to be a natural progression. I mean, I think you'll find. I kind of think that, as kind of women come up, I think you'll see more female athletes advocating and coming into the space too in different roles. And you see a lot of male athletes being able to pivot their careers into things where they're kind of in leadership positions in sports and leadership positions on kind of in entertainment. And I see the same thing happening. And I think as that happens, we have more decision makers in those key roles. Based on their experiences, they'll begin to start advocating accordingly. Yeah.
And so to thank Next.io obviously for hosting this panel, because I think we're going to see more and more of this coming up in conferences. I know there's some great associations and resources already in the industry. So All in Diversity, obviously Global Gaming Women, Women in Gaming. One I just heard of today, so Betting Ladies. Are there any that you'd like to mention, or how people can kind of like?
Yes, and I actually just kind of pulled it up. I'll find it, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's like I think it's the Women's Sports Foundation. So, and it's like it was supported, kind of created by Billie Jean, like in 1974. I mean, so it's really designed as an opportunity to help women in sports and elevate that. And so, but there's so many different organizations that are part of that, and also I think it's having these conversations, and as you're starting to. As organizations are starting to think from their marketing perspective, some things that they're doing, being very intentional in how they position their products, how they kind of identify what are the opportunities and people they want to partner with, what are different things they can do. So I feel like it's not just a one thing. It's starting with offering from the platform, and what are the things that you can do, like I said, to create this community, to create these authentic connections, and to create this opportunity where you have like stats and all of the information, one-stop shopping. But then I think it's kind of from there, like how are you viewing and valuing, your female athletes and female sports teams relative to kind of the collective, and making sure that you're giving them equal consideration when you're kind of pulling things together. And then I think it's, really kind of focusing on kind of what are the core incentives that, and the things that are going to resonate with women players outside of changing the color or kind of being, or kind of placating and kind of surface, but really kind of digging in and understanding what are those core motivators. And because you find that in some cases they're not so different, and it's really just a shifting in kind of how that message is presented versus having to go completely off the left field.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many things to take into account, but it's definitely evident that, it's not inching forward, but it's leaping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Giant leaps. Anika, thank you so much for joining me, and happy International Women's Day to everyone on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you. Good.